I grew up right next to a farmer in their fields. My brother and I used to go in the field when the corn stalks got nice and high so we could have our own little adventure. My mom always thought we were at the park about a block away. She would not have condoned that. One time walking through the fields, we started hearing a strange mechanical sound, but couldn't figure it out. My brother put me on his shoulders and I saw a combine not too far away, quickly getting closer. I couldn't remember the word for it at the time, so I told my brother we had to go. The big harvest tractor was coming. My plan was to run straight back to the edge of the field, but my brother pulled me to the side so we weren't in its path. I wasn't scared at the time, but looking back we could have easily been run over if we hadn't been paying attention. End quote. Welcome back. Dark Recaps here, wishing you a haunted new year. Hit that like button and subscribe for more creepy true stories in 2023. Let's continue. The Potato Hopper. Quote, I worked at a small farm. One day we were planting potatoes. Me and another man were on the back of a machine that had a big potato seed hopper and 2 chutes. Each chute led to 4 rotating arms that rotated on an axle and planted the potatoes in the ground. Our job was to make sure each arm had a seed on it. There were needles on the ends of the arm that held the potato seeds, basically just small potatoes if you are unfamiliar. The fields had just been fertilized with chicken feces from a large egg processing facility. The guy I was working with, named No or Nong. Being a Vietnam veteran, he was an ARVN. He didn't speak much English and he was fairly busted up from the war. I also found out that he had an almost inhuman pain threshold when one of his hands became impaled on the needles. This jammed the mechanism on both sides, and when I looked at him, Nong said my name and help very calmly. I saw his arm and yelled at the farmer to stop the tractor, which he did very quickly. The farmer pulled the belt off of the axle mechanism and we pulled Nong's arm out of the machine. He had a hole in his hand you could see through. The farmer drove Nong to the hospital and I drove home. They amputated his hand because the risk of infection was way too high with all of the chicken feces. I only worked for that farmer a couple of times after, but even he, being a veteran farmer, seemed to be pretty shaken up about it. I have had a couple of nightmares myself, and this was over 30 years ago. End quote. Something in the woods. Quote, my family had a small farm for many years. We lived on 25 acres in the middle of nowhere. The roads weren't paved and turned into deep muddy pits when it rained. For this reason, the school bus never attempted to pick us up near the house. My siblings' buses came later in the morning, so they had the pleasure of walking to the bus stop after dawn. I did not, and found myself walking alone on pitch-black dirt roads in the winter. To this day, I don't know why I never used a flashlight. This was the time before cell phones and the internet. On both sides of the dirt road loomed thick, wild forest. Oftentimes while traveling the road, I'd hear footsteps and a rustle of bushes. Always on the left side, for unknown reasons. Occasionally, I would walk face first through a gigantic spider web that spanned from one side of the road to the other, and freak myself out wondering how huge that spider must be. Most mornings I would feel like someone or something was walking beside me in the woods. The bugs would fall silent and I could hear its footsteps. I felt its gaze upon me as we walked together to the bus stop. Never saw the thing. I was equal parts terrified and excited. Country people are just built different. This cycle continued for years. End quote. Vanished in seconds. Quote, my story is more of a what the hell type, rather than scary. I was 19. It was summer after my first failed attempt at college, and I was back home trying to figure out what to do next. I was helping out on the farm. That week, we were baling hay. I drove the tractor pulling a baler and a hay rack, while my dad pulled the bales from the baler and stacked them on the rack. Something jammed and my dad was trying to fix it. I was kinda spaced out gazing in the direction of a full rack of hay we had finished earlier. Then I see this guy who was probably in his 60s, half bald, wearing sort of old-fashioned clothes, looking over the full rack of hay. My first thought was an Amish guy had stopped by to talk to my dad, but then I realized he was clean-shaven when an Amish man of that age would have a beard. So that seemed odd. Also odd was that after he walked around a bit admiring the hay, he seemed to vanish while my head was turned. There was no truck, horse-drawn conveyance, tractor, or other method of transportation leaving. No person walking or running, and no cover close enough that he could have gotten to by the time my head was turned. I figured he must be standing on the edge of the far side of the full hay rack, behind the hay. It would be an odd thing to do, but there was nowhere else he could be. At that point, Dad had decided the baler needed to go back to the farm, and so we unhooked the half-full rack and pulled up to attach the full one, to tow it back to the farm behind the baler. Meanwhile, I'm looking out for this guy, and he isn't there. I scan the field and don't see anyone, and again, the nearest cover, the woods, was too far away for him to get there without being seen. I asked my dad if he saw him, but he was busy with the baler and not paying attention. End quote. They were running towards us. Quote. Not super scary, but definitely weird. My grandpa had a farm with free-range cattle. He had a massive property. We didn't always see the cows every day. They'd go off in the fields in little groups. We knew they were out there, but they just did their own thing. We visited the farm one day and my grandparents weren't home. They always had a spare key hidden on the porch in case a family member was visiting, and they weren't around. Well, my mom unlocked the door and the alarm went off. It was loud. Because they're in the country, the alarm was made to sound like a siren to alert the closest neighbors. It echoed all over the fields. We were in the house, calling family members on their rotary phone, trying to figure out how to shut off the alarm. Then I looked out the window. The cows. Cows from all directions running towards us. I had never seen them run like this. They were running at the house full speed, every single one. Then they stopped. They formed a circle around the entire house, standing shoulder to shoulder. They just stood there staring at us. It was so weird. I wish I had a photo, but this was before cameras were super accessible. They stayed there until my grandpa showed up, then they dispersed. Like his big security guards or something. End quote. Intense feeling of being watched. Quote. My family always had cattle growing up. We ran them in different lots depending on how many we had, and what land we were leasing. They were typically in wooded pastures down the main road from our house in either direction. One small pasture where we ran cattle was up against an 80-acre lot that was heavily wooden. Undeveloped, no roads, no trails, nothing. This ran up against the Corps of Engineers land. Anyway, it was often enough that we'd be tending to the cattle there in some way, and they'd be spooked by something in the woods. They'd put a good space between themselves and the fence line, standing in a rough line staring at the woods. This would have been during the day or in the evening, and we'd most often be on tractor loading feeders. So, this means we would be making a ton of noise. Whatever was scaring the cattle wasn't intimidated by us at all. We didn't talk about it, but it seemed odd even when I was a kid, and I hated when it would happen. Intense feeling of being watched, and feeling the need to always keep an eye on the fence line. We never lost anything to predators. We didn't have bears or mountain lions there, though I heard young males would sometimes pass through. Coyotes would be way too shy for the noise and activity. It was random when it would happen, but consistent through my childhood in this pasture. No idea what was going on." End quote. Middle of nowhere. Quote, "My dad used to rent this house way out in the middle of nowhere. A good 45 minutes from any town. The closest neighbor was another 15 minutes away. On this property were several enclosures for raising pheasants. These belonged to the property owner, so my dad had no responsibility towards them other than to notify the owner if he saw anything wrong. He was high school buddies with the owner, so they were on good terms. Well, one morning he notices something very wrong. In the pheasant enclosure furthest from the house, with a good 50 or so birds. Every single one of them had been slaughtered overnight. What was even weirder was that it didn't seem to be an act of predation. None of the birds seemed to have been consumed. Luckily, the owner had cameras, and they got to see what really happened. So sometime in the middle of the night, a man neither of them recognized had wandered onto the property. He made no attempt to approach the house, but instead crawled under the enclosure's fence and proceeded to catch and stab each pheasant with a knife while wearing a headlamp. They caught the entire event on camera, from him entering the property till he left early in the morning. The police were called, but nothing ever came of it. My dad was so freaked out from the whole event that he made us stay with our mom for several weeks while he slept in bed with a gun. The property owner tightened up security with new fences and alarms. He even bought some guard dogs. They were very well trained and super friendly to anyone who'd approach them during the day. Nothing ever happened again on that farm, and the bird-killing psycho was never found." End quote. Let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced something disturbing like this. I'd be interested to read about your experience. Thanks for watching, and please consider leaving a like on this video. If you enjoy the content, hitting that subscribe button doesn't cost you anything. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.